Happy New Year and welcome to Crimepedia, a crime podcast, a true crime podcast, this week hosted by me, Cherry, alongside my very good friend, the lovely Morgan.
Hello, Cherry. How are you? I've missed you.
I've missed you too. We've had a really good break over Christmas and New Year, and it's been really good to get researching some new episodes for this year coming. And we had a nice break with family. It's been really lovely.
Good. Yeah, it's feel like it's been quite a while since we've been together, so it's nice to be back in action and recording and doing some more cases for everyone.
Yeah, we've got a good year lined up this year of places that we're going to be visiting. I'm going to be in America later this year, and you're going to be in England later this year. So we've got quite a good set of stuff to do. We're going to be in CrimeCon UK in London, so make sure you come and see us in September. Go and visit crimecon.co.uk for more information about that, because it's a new venue this year. It's a new layout. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. There's some great stuff going on, some really good speakers this year. um and I always say every year CrimeCon gets better and better and better. And I think this year is going to be one of those years. It's going to be a really good year this year. So Morgan's coming over for that one. And then I'm going to be in Arkansas in August for True Crime Fest. So again, another brilliant event, which is a very victim and family focused event, which raises money for some brilliant causes. And that's put on by All the Lost Girls, which is a brilliant charity that we both work for. And I'm really looking forward to being there too. So it's going to be a good year this year. I think 2024 is going to be a really good year.
Yeah, I'm excited. It should be a lot of fun. We should have a lot of great cases that we're going to cover. So it's going to be a good year for us.
Yeah. So this week's case is a case that I found over Christmas, actually, whilst I was researching some murders in the London area, and this one came up, and this week's case is the case of Jean Townsend. What if I were to tell you that 5 murders and 4 attacks all took place in a small area of London, all with very similar MOs, and all with witnesses reporting very similar information? You'd think that they were all related, right? And that it would be easier to pin down a perpetrator. Well, you'd be wrong, because all of those, to this day, are still unsolved. This is Crimepedia, and we're going to start 2024 with the case of Jean Townsend. Okay, Morgan, so Jean Mary Townsend was born on the 11th of March 1933. She lived at home with her parents, and her family home was 92 Bempton Drive in South Ruislip. Now, South Ruislip is in the London borough of Hillingdon, and she was the manageress of a women's department in Leicester Square. It was a firm that was theatrical and film costume makers, and that was in Irving Street, and this is in the West End of London. Obviously, if you don't know London very well, or England very well, the West End of London is the very theatrical part of London. It's where everybody wants to go and perform. It's where all the good stage shows are, and it's a really kind of busy, and that's the only way I can describe it. It's a very theatrical part of London. She was described as a young woman with a very respectable reputation. She was described by the director of the company to be a sweet girl, very intelligent, very charming. She was also described as being a friend of stage and screen stars. So she was somebody who would act with discretion. She wasn't somebody who was very loud and would attract a lot of attention to herself. She was very quiet. She very rarely drank alcohol whilst at social engagements. And she was just a very trusted member of staff, and a lovely young woman is the best way to describe her. On the 14th of September 1954, She attended a function known as a pyramid party. Do you know what that is?
I have no idea what a pyramid party is. No, I've
So
never
I
heard of
had
that.
no idea either. And I googled a pyramid party. Now basically, you know those schemes that you have? We have pyramid schemes here in England, and it's a scheme
We have
where
them here, yeah.
yeah, so it's basically the same thing, but instead of doing it away, you basically hand each other cash. So she would host a party and everybody at the party would hand her a certain amount of money. And then it goes down like a pyramid scheme. So the first person starts the party, they invite 4 guests, and then those guests will give them money. Then the next person invites 4 guests to them, and those 4 guests give them money, and it goes up like that. So it's a good way to make cash fast. And this is when the
What?
pyramid
Wait,
party, I know, it's
wait.
crazy.
What are they giving them money for?
For nothing. It's for nothing because it's a way for you to make money quick. If you attend these parties, you're only giving out like $20, say, to the person that party you're going to, but everybody else is giving that person $20 too. So the next party that you go to, you only have to give out $20. So you actually recoup in money quite quickly. But as it goes down the line, obviously you don't earn so much money.
This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. This
Well,
is
apparently it was
ridiculous.
yeah, apparently, but I mean, I was approached by somebody who asked me to do a box scheme where you buy in quote air quotes a box of you basically buy this box for like £100 and then you sell on the
Hmm.
box to somebody else for like 150 and then they buy the box. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. I don't what am I buying a box of? And they were like, well, it's just a it's a it's a fake box. You just it's a I was like, well, that doesn't make
What?
sense. And I'm not parting with my money. But people do. They do it. They do these pyramid schemes all the time.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, I understand like how they work, and I understand why some
Yeah.
people would get into it, right?
Yeah.
But to go and say like with the box, like here's the box, buy it for $100. Now you go and sell it for 150. That makes no sense. But then this whole of like, okay, we're going to party, and the whole purpose of the party is for you to give the host money, and
Yeah.
then you go and
You
you
host
host
a
your party, and
party.
then people
Yeah.
give you money,
You money. Yeah.
and people are like, oh, this is a good idea. First off, why wouldn't you just say, well, screw going to a party, I'm just going to host my own parties and never go to anyone else's parties?
Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. There are people that probably would have done that and thought about that, but technically,
Right.
morally, you're supposed to, if you're going to be within this, you're
Okay.
supposed to attend other people's parties and you're supposed to give them money like they did
Yeah.
you. So yeah,
Okay.
well, I mean,
Gotcha.
it's believed that this particular party was being hosted by her. This was her party, and it was time for her to obviously take the money. Now she was known to regularly attend these parties, so this is something that people knew that she did. She caught the last Central Line train, which returned to South Ruislip later in the evening that evening, and around 11:45
Hmm.
p.m. she was seen leaving South Ruislip station. Now, to head home, it was only zero point 0.8 miles. So it would have been like less than 20 minutes, maybe about an 15 to 18-minute walk from the station to her
Okay.
home. Now, she was seen, I've given you the map to have a look at. She was seen walking alone along Victoria Road, which would then have taken her into Whitby Road and then into Bempton Drive, which is her home. So you can
Yeah.
see there's this big long straight in Ruislip, and you can see obviously when I was looking at it, I'm looking at it from now, and things are a little bit different than they were back in the 1950s. But you can see the same road is still there; it's still the same kind of layout. So she got from the station and she walked along Victoria Road. She would have been walking to Whitby Road and then onto Bempton Drive. Now, the problem with that is she never actually made it home. Her body
Oh,
was
okay.
discovered the following morning at around 7 a.m. Now, there are many reports that will say a milkman found her, but then there are other reports that will say a groundsman who was going to cut the thicket down of the area was the one that found her. So it depends. At the time, it was an area of waste ground to the side of Victoria Road at the junction with Angus Road. So you can see when you look at the map, you can see that there is actually a church there now. It's the site of St. Gregory the Great Catholic Church, which opened in 1967. So you can actually see exactly where the waste ground was. And that is where
Okay.
her body was found.
Oh, yep. Okay, I see it.
Yeah. So you can see it. So that was where her body was found, in that area, which was wasteland at the time. So you can see she's
And
not far from home at all.
and the station was on Victoria Road as well?
Well, is no, the station is down, is off of Victoria, but that's the way she would have
Oh,
walked from the station to Victoria Road and then
okay.
Victoria Road home. And that was where her body was
Gotcha. Okay,
found,
I
just
see
there. Where,
I see the train
yeah,
lines now. Okay.
yeah. So it's not far. You can see it's not very far from
No.
home. And I find that really sad that she was almost, very, very almost home.
Mhm.
So Scotland
That's
Yard were
really
called
close.
in. Yeah. A guy called Detective Superintendent Richardson was in charge of the investigation, and the post mortem was carried out by a Home Office pathologist called Professor Donald Tier. Now, he stated that she had been strangled with her own scarf, which was a black and gold silk scarf. He estimated time of death to be around midnight, and it was reported that despite various items of her clothing being removed, they didn't believe that she had been sexually assaulted. Whether that was because the person didn't have time or had been disturbed. But the clothing, which is a really interesting part of this, is that the clothing that was taken off of her, which was her underwear and her stockings, had been carefully folded in a neat pile next to her body,
Oh,
which
okay.
is, yeah, it's very interesting. It's not something that we usually hear in, in an attempt in an
No.
attack sort of situation like this. Her clothes were said to be damp, with rain. Her black gold striped scarf that she had been strangled with was actually still wound around her neck when she was found. And she was wearing black velvet court shoes and stockings, and they had been pulled off. But the police believed that actually they thought that there had been no assault as such, and that actually those stockings and shoes had come off as she was being pulled through the thickets into the wasteland area.
Hmm. Okay.
So Jean's father was a post office engineer, and he called the West End costumers where she worked to find out where she was the next morning, to say that she hadn't come home, was everything okay? And they did say, well, no, she left last night, and as far as we knew, she was on her way home. So he then called police, and then that's how they were able to identify her. So I think she didn't actually get identified until about midday on the day that she was found. But as word got out about Jean's murder, local women started to come forward to police with details of events leading up to Jean's murder. A lady called Jacqueline Cliff reported to police that she had been accosted in a phone box at 10:30 p.m. on the night before the murder by two men. One of the men had an American accent and drove an American-style station wagon. The other man, she described, was wearing an American uniform. She
Hmm.
said that the second man was also aged about 30 with a very high forehead. So I had a look at that to see. It was interesting that there was an American in the area. I found that there was actually a base, which we'll talk about in a minute. There was a base close, so that would explain why there would be Americans in the area. A lady called Brenda Thompson lived at home with her parents in Westmead Road. Now, this overlooked the area where Jean was killed. She had been in bed that night when she heard a woman scream. So she got up and went to the window. And at that time, the lights didn't turn off in the streets until about midnight. It wasn't midnight yet. So when she looked out, she could see the street. She heard the scream, but couldn't actually see anything. So she called her dad to come up and look with her. And they both stood at the window looking out and listening for a little while. After a few minutes, they heard two men arguing. One man appeared to have an American accent, and it seemed that one of the men was really agitated and the other one was trying to calm him down.
Okay.
Now, Brenda had told police that on the previous evening she had walked past the waste ground where Jean was found, and that two men had tried to stop her, but she managed to get away from them and get straight home because she literally lived just across the road. Now, another young woman came forward, a lady called Joan Gala. She reported being strangled by a man late at night on Victoria Road the Saturday before the murder. So this is all of these things, all these women are coming forward in this same area. They're all talking about being accosted by two men, and all of them have said one of the men at least had an American accent.
Real quick, they're coming forward after the fact, right?
Yes, they come forward after Jean was found. Yeah,
S-
yeah.
So these weren't reported to police prior.
No.
Okay. Because
So
I'm
yeah,
thinking,
they
I'm
went.
like, well, if there's
Yeah.
all these, like, if there's all these potential or all these attacks in this area,
Mm.
why isn't there police
Well, I think
presence
G- I
or
think G- I
something going
think
on?
yeah, I think it was Brenda. It had only happened the night before. So it was the night before the murder, so she hadn't had time to go to the police yet. It was only
Okay.
when
Okay.
she saw all the police outside she went forward. Um, Brenda
Okay.
Tom it was Brenda. It was Brenda that lived across the road. She that had only happened the night before, so I can understand that. Now, the Jacqueline
Mhm.
Cliff lady, that had happened I think it was the night before the murder again. So this has all happened in like a couple of days. So I don't think these women have had a lot of time to actually come forward. It was only
Okay.
Joan. Joan was the one that was a week before, and she had actually reported it. So Joan said that she had been walking along. She'd been walking along Victoria Road, and these two guys, a man had sort of stopped her, but it was traveling behind her. She stopped and said, "Look, why are you following me?" And he grabbed her and then tried to strangle her. So she fought back away from him and apparently scratched his face and pulled off some buttons from his outfit. She describes him as wearing a brown coat with gabardine trousers. Gabardine, I don't know if they're actually still a thing nowadays, but I remember my grandparents talking about gabardine trousers. It's a make of trousers which is very tough and durable, and
Mhm.
it's usually used to make suits or uniforms, trousers, workwear, that kind of thing. And
Okay.
Joan says that this guy grabbed hold of her and she managed to try and get away. Now, interestingly, at the same time as Jean's murder, the police were actually investigating the death of a lady called Ellen Carlin. Now, Ellen Carlin had been strangled with a piece of her own clothing a week before Jean's murder. And they were actually investigating this at the same time when they found Jean's body. Now, she was found on her bed in her bedroom, partly dressed, and she had a stocking tied round her neck and a towel left over her face. The cause of death was asphyxiation due to ligature strangulation. Now, police found 2 packets of American cigarettes and some American whiskey bottles in
Mm.
her room. Witnesses came forward to say that she had been seen with an American Air Force sergeant on the night that she died. Shortly after her murder, police appealed to speak to a taxi driver who was thought to have picked up Ellen with a man in the West End of London that night, on the night she was killed. The taxi driver was actually traced, and he said that he had indeed picked up Ellen and a fair-haired American man from Piccadilly and had taken them back to Pimlico, where she lived, on the 4th of September, and they had both gone into Ellen's flat. So the taxi driver was really good, actually. He gave a really good detailed description of this man. He was described as baby faced, with fair hair and cold blue eyes, aged around 22 to 24 with smooth skin. So I'm guessing, I mean, usually a serviceman would have to have clean shaven face, wouldn't he? So that would fit with what
Yes.
they're so far hearing. They've said that
Yep.
he is stocky, wearing a dove grey gabardine trousers with small checked sports coat with patch pockets and a plain shirt and tie.
Okay.
So that was interesting. And I think I've just mixed these two ladies up. I think I've mixed up Joan with the next lady that I'm going to tell you about. It was Doris. Several weeks after the murder, a lady called Doris was attacked by a man who she described as being about 30. Now she describes him as having a high forehead. This is the lady that scratched him and had the buttons. He was following her for some distance along the road. He then attacked her after she stopped and asked him why he was following her. He tried to strangle her, but she fought back and tore the buttons clean off of his top. The next day, she returned back to where she was actually attacked and picked up the buttons in tissue and took them to the police and gave them an account of her attack and gave them the buttons. But unfortunately, nothing ever came of that reporting.
Mm.
So we've got like four or five women here that are all describing a very similar situation. They're describing one or two men. They're describing an American accent. They're describing this guy with his high forehead, and they're describing this like certain type of clothing. These men seem to always be wearing a certain type of clothes. Now, On
Yeah.
the 20th of September 1954, it was reported that police were handed some blood-stained clothing. They were handed to a firm of cleaners, and the cleaner lady said that the man had a badly scratched face. The the guy had visited this cleaning firm. It was a pair of gabardine trousers and a blood-stained shirt. Now, the woman who took it was a branch of cleaners in South Ruislip, by the underground station. This was handed into them less than 36 hours after Jean Townsend's body was found. So the manageress of this office said on Thursday afternoon, a man with a high forehead and an American accent came into the office in civilian clothes and gave us a red check shirt with bloodstains on both sides of the front. He also handed in a pair of grey gabardine trousers with bloodstains on the front of both legs. The trousers were torn. He had scratches on his eye and his cheek, and they were fresh. And I said to him, "Where have you been? In a scrap?" And he said, "Sort of." So again, we've got somebody
Mm.
else coming forward now with this high foreheaded American accent guy wearing,
Yep.
she said there, he was wearing grey gabardine trousers, but one of the other ladies said they were dove blue. But so I'm thinking that sounds like pretty similar. Sounds like a similar guy.
Yep.
And that sounds to me like
It,
the same guy that was
it's the
with,
same guy.
yeah, the same guy that was with Ellen, that went back to Ellen's flat, because the taxi driver said he had a checked shirt on, didn't he? And he had gabardine trousers on.
Yep. Yep. That's the same
Well,
guy. Has to be.
yeah, I agree. The manageress said that he was about 24 to 26, had a high forehead, and was stockily built. However, the man was later traced, and the police said that they were certain he had no connection with the murder.
You're kidding me.
No.
Wha-
Researching this, I was like, yeah,
How?
it's definitely him. They've got him. Definitely him. Definitely him. And then it came back that actually the police had traced him and they'd done their inquiries, and that he wasn't the man that they were looking for.
Come on. All
I
right.
know. I was so disappointed at that, because I really thought when I was researching it, I really thought we had him then for a minute. I mean, at the time of the attacks, there
That
was there was an RAF base. It wasn't one that you fly in and out of. It was like a static RAF base, and that was stationed at South Ruislip. And on the
Yep.
30th of September, 1954, it was reported by police that every one of the 45,000 American airmen in Britain were to be questioned by detectives in connection with Ellen Carlin's murder. Now they are starting to kind of put Ellen's murder and sort of linking it to Jean's murder. But it kind of is, they're very focused on Ellen for whatever reason. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was said that detectives were going to be helped by the US Air Force, and that they were going to be also helping with the investigation with these guys. And also the Office of Special Investigations were going to be part of this as well. That's really all I could find about this whole operation, to identify, to speak to 45,000 American airmen. I mean, that's a lot of
That is a
people to
lot.
cover. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And also, it made me think, well, okay, how often are these airmen in and out? You know, what if
Yeah.
they were only here stationed for like a week or something, and then they were off again? How do you, is it
Well,
45,000 in total that have been there, or is that who's there at the moment? What, how do you police that?
well, here's the thing. So the that's I was just well, as you're telling this, I was just looking this up. So this it's the U.S. Air Force South Ruislip, right? So
Yeah.
that was actually where the uh it was actually a hospital. So it was at a hospital at
Yes.
the base. So not only do
Yeah.
you have people that are stationed there, but you have people that are being coming in and out to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we're probably talking more than 4,500. So you
Yeah.
got to look at who's actually stationed there, who actually is being treated at this hospital or was being treated at
Yeah.
this hospital at the time. So how
Yep.
many people does that are you going to be looking at now?
Yeah.
So yeah, with the hospital, you could have someone in and out in a day or two,
Yeah.
or a week or two.
Yeah.
Um, chances are if they're stationed there, you're going to have people transition out and in and out all the time, but you don't have huge turnover, uh,
No.
constantly.
No, and you should. I mean, they should have records of who was based. They know which platoons and which groups are coming in and out, so they should know who was based there at the
Yes.
time. Because over that period, they should have reports of who's who. Now there was a lot of suspicion locally that it was a big cover up by the American Armed Forces, that one of theirs
Hmm.
had been murdering or had been attacking women, and what they had done is they had actually got him and shipped him out before any bad press could come on the American Air Force in the area, because obviously it would be bad press. Army and forces, they do get bad press on downtime. I mean, they're great when they're at war, but you do get a lot, they're out on a night out, they all get a bit drunk, they all get a bit feisty. It happens. It happens. It's a group of young men that are let loose for the weekend, and things go on. And so there
Hmm.
there was a lot of speculation that perhaps this had been a cover up, and it had actually have been an American forces, RAF or an army personnel that had done this. But it was kind of, that was the local thing that people thought. I mean, even vigilantes started making nightly patrols along the South Ruislip, the stretch from South Ruislip Station up to Bideford Road in Ruislip Manor. Now, this was a route that went up Victoria Road, past the area where Jean was murdered, and that actual road became known
Yeah.
as Murder Mile. So people in the area would actually refer to that as Murder Mile. The patrols were organised by a former army NCO, a guy called I can't remember what his name was, but he was 49. He had a 17-year-old daughter, and he put
Hmm.
together this patrol squad, and it was volunteers, about 14 members. All of them were fathers of teenage girls, and they were unarmed. Obviously, they would
Yep.
start their patrol each night at 10:45, and they continued right the way through the morning until 1 a.m. And that was when it was thought to be quite busy out, when people were out and about and they were drinking and stuff like that. And he said, the patrols do not see girls home. Our job is to make sure that no one is molested. And I think, oh, that's
Mm.
that's the dads getting together, and doing that. Well, I started to look into other cases if there anything similar, and there were some similar reports of some murders of young women. I have to mention, but there's not a lot of information about it online. But it is mentioned on places like Reddit, and it is mentioned in some other forums that I was in. In West Germany, there were a few murders that were very similar to those of Jean Townsend and of Ellen. They were almost, in fact, they were almost identical, which is quite scary. They were also in West Germany in the early 1950s, close to US military bases. There's not a lot
Yeah.
of evidence to back this up, although there is talk about it online, and so I thought it would be bad if I didn't mention it. So if you do see that when you're looking into this case, you'll know what I mean. So there were a few women that had been left at the side of the road, that had been strangled with their own clothing. All in the west of Germany, and we're talking post-war, so we're talking about there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on. Unfortunately, there were quite a lot of murders around this time. I couldn't actually find a lot of information about those in particular, to get individual details. It's just mentioned as a group of women. Now, at her inquest on the 19th of October in 1954, it took the jury 15 seconds to decide that Jean Townsend had been murdered.
Whoa.
It was
Oh,
that obvious,
I'm
obviously.
glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah, me
Like,
too.
yeah, murdered.
I'm glad it wasn't a suicide, ruled a suicide or something
Right.
like that. So it was heard that the police had taken over 600 statements during the course of the investigation. And the police actually did a reconstruction on Jean's murder. They believed, from what they had pieced together from witness statements and from investigation on that night, was that two men had been in or near Victoria Road on the night of the 14th of September, and that one of
Hmm.
them was perhaps not thinking about murder, but just like a sexual assault. The police said they thought that as Jean passed them, she was like 6 minutes from home, something stupid like that. One of the men had grabbed her and then dragged her into the waste ground. To stop her from screaming,
Mm.
he had tightened the scarf around her neck, but actually he'd done it too much and she had died. The other man was waiting on the pavement to warn his friend if anyone was coming, and then apparently the man, when he came back out again, that's the discussion that Brenda and her dad heard of him panicking and the other guy trying to calm him down.
Mm,
That's what they've pieced together
yeah.
from those from that. Um,
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's no definite murder suspect for Jean's case. In fact, there's no definite suspect for any of these women that have come forward. There's nothing. Even Ellen's murder, there's no definite suspect for it. There was a guy who had admitted to killing Ellen, but it came out that he was lying and it wasn't him. So after 28 years after her murder, the case had gone cold. Now, police announced that they had actually had a number of anonymous phone calls saying that they should be reviewing the files on the case and that they were very interested in what the caller had to say. Now, as a result of that information, they were confident that no American servicemen were involved in the killing and that there was no link between Jean's murder and any other crime, which
Mm.
could be taken to mean that they had been given very specific information about Jean's murder.
Mm. Okay, so let me say this. So
Hmm.
so they said that it was not a serviceman,
Yeah.
and I just this might be a reason why. So
Okay.
I was looking this up, and I came across this website. It's like memories from USAF South Ruislip,
Yeah.
and I found this. This was interesting, right? So this was someone who posted that said between 1954 and 1957, our family lived in Pembroke Road, Ruislip, while my father was stationed at USAF Wickham.
Wickham.
I
Yeah.
think that's how you pronounce it.
There it is. Yeah.
Um, okay, so the United States Air Force Base at South Ruislip was then headquarters for the U.S. Third Air Force,
Hmm.
and so they continued. They said that they would frequently go down to the South Ruislip base for
Yeah.
medical and dental examinations at the hospital, but they would also have movies there. There was a library, a post exchange in the commissary, a chapel, and that they would have sporting events there. So we got to remember that not only do you have servicemen who are
Yeah.
in the area and being stationed at South Ruislip, but that you also have servicemen in the family that are in the area that are stationed elsewhere.
Elsewhere.
So the
Yeah.
key word is family, right? So maybe it wasn't a
Yeah.
serviceman. Maybe it was an older teen,
Family member. Yeah.
son, family member
Yeah.
who was involved in this.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
So so is it possible that they know that it was like, okay, well, yeah, it wasn't this serviceman that did it, but it was this,
Yeah.
lieutenant's son or whatever it
Yeah.
might
Have
be.
they been given? Yeah. Have they been given extra information?
Hmm.
Well, I
So
mean,
maybe
Jean's
that's why
mother.
they're sure it wasn't a serviceman.
Maybe, yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they're sure it wasn't. And they're saying that they don't believe that it had anything to do with an American. But I mean, that's strange because the witnesses are all saying that the person that they saw, the person that they heard speaking, had an American accent. So that's quite interesting. They are, the police are actually convinced that it's not an American serviceman. But I mean, does that mean that it was a serviceman, or it was a man that just wasn't was just an American man? Maybe.
Yeah, I I
In
I
which
think it
case,
is
like you
American. I
say, a
mean, you're
family member, an American family member, because they've all mentioned this American accent.
yeah, and you're a mile away from South Ruislip
Yeah,
base at the time.
yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, why would someone make it up? And multiple people make up an American accent or it being
yeah,
an American.
yeah. Well, Jean's mother, her mother was called Lillian. She was interviewed by the Daily Mail in 1982. And I thought this was really strange. I don't know if it's been taken out of context, but she's quoted as saying, "I never really got over her death. A clairvoyant told me whoever did it was far away across water, but now it's nothing to me. I'm not vindictive. I don't know why they should reopen the case." Now, another 23 years would pass before the case would be reviewed again by a Freedom of Information request in 2005. a former neighbour and school friend of Jean, so this guy that knew her, a guy called Reg Hargrave, wanted to access the police files for the case. Now, this had been 51 years that had elapsed since this had happened, and the files had been moved to the National
Hmm.
Archive in Kew. Now, we know about this because we've submitted requests to the National Archive in Kew many a time, and many a time they've actually been refused to us too. And again, in Reg Hargrave's case, the request was refused. Now, a hearing had been held behind closed doors, and this is what happens when you do send in one of these requests. They have to look at the case, look at why you want to look into it. They look at all the stuff that's in the cases, and they deem whether or not that information should be given out to the public. Now, this hearing had been held behind closed doors regarding the Freedom of Information request by Reg Hargrave. And during this information was presented that Jean's clothing had been re examined in the 1990s with the aim of obtaining DNA
Hmm.
evidence for the Forensic Science Service. Now, sadly, these results proved nothing of value. It was also disclosed during this tribunal hearing that whilst the files were substantial, there were a number of items missing from the files, and that the tribunal ruled then that the files must remain closed.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
Jean's case basically has stopped there. Now, since Jean's murder, there have actually been other murders in the area. A lady called Diana Sutty was
Hmm.
found strangled in Green Lane, which is Leverstock Green, Hemel Hempstead. She was killed on Friday, the 7th of September, 1956. Muriel Maitland, she was killed in 1957 near Heathrow Airport, which is a few miles from Ruislip. So they believe that one could be linked. And then in June 1971, another woman, a girl called Gloria Booth, was murdered along Murder Mile, the same place, about half a mile from where Jean Townsend was found. And her murder is also unsolved. So to this day,
Jesus.
all of those attacks, Ellen Carter's murder, Jean's murder, Gloria Booth's murder, all in the same area and all are unsolved.
That is insane.
That's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot of women in the same area from like 1950, 1954 right the way through until 1971, all in the same area. Hope that's not too screechy for you, but I'm getting kind of passionate about this.
That is a lot for this. I mean, it's a small
Isn't
community.
it?
It looks like to
It
me,
is a small
especially at that
community.
time.
Yeah. It is a small
That
community. And
that is very
I looked at this
worrisome.
and
I
I
mean,
was like, wow, that's a lot of murders, all women, all killed in similar situations, all in roughly the same area in like a 20
I
year near enough
I
20
mean, I
year
don't.
period.
That is really, really crazy.
I thought you'd find that interesting because these ladies' names aren't names that I think are linked together that we've heard of a lot. I'd never heard of Jean
Uh-uh.
Townsend. I'd never heard of these other ladies. And I find that really strange that nobody's looking into this more. I know it's a long time ago. I understand that. But I do find it strange that nobody's trying
Still.
to link these people, you know? We've got 1954. We've got all of those women. We've got Ellen's like murder, which is definitely a murder. We've also got all the women that came forward, Jacqueline, we've got Brenda, we've got what was the other lady called? Joan came forward. Um all these different women coming forward to say that somebody had tried to attack them. And then again, you've then got Jean's murder, then you've got Diana's murder, Muriel Maitland's murder, Gloria Booth's murder. I mean, that's a lot of women
Hmm.
in similar circumstances in the same area. I think it's too coincidental to not be looked at.
Yeah, Gloria Booth was a mile from
Yeah, from where
Jean
Jean
Townsend's
was.
killing. Yeah, look at
Yeah.
that. That is crazy.
I feel like this is one of those cases where you need a big map up on the wall and you need to have the
Mm.
pins in it to look. And at that time, I mean, we're talking the 50s. That's quite a substantial amount of women that's been lost. But to this
And I
day,
and I bet a lot.
they're all still
I bet a
unsolved.
lot of them are right there around the U.S. Air Force base, right?
Yeah.
Or there's multiple bases in an area. I mean,
Yeah.
you have another RIF. actually an RAF station right across the tracks from where
Yeah.
that South Ricelip is.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a bunch in this area.
yeah. Well, it's close, isn't it? It's close to, like, the airports, it's near London. It is it's very
Hmm.
centrally it's very centrally based, isn't it? I mean, yeah, you got RAF
Yeah.
Station Northolt, which is just across the track. You've got that one there as well, and that's really close to where she was. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? I thought you'd just find this a really interesting case, and I thought that maybe other people might find it interesting to look into, because there's so much to look into of all these different. I was trying to put the similarities all together, and they are very, very similar in MO. All of these attacks and
Hmm.
all of the murders that actually did occur and the attacks that occurred, they're all very, very similar, I think.
I mean, if it was a serviceman or family member of someone on the surface, I couldn't imagine that the murders that occurred in '54 would be done by the same person that that killed
No,
Gloria
in
in
71.
1971.
But then you don't know,
But
because if
I
they were
think,
younger, you don't know.
I mean, that's true. That's very
If they were
true.
young men, if they were in their early 20s in 1954, if they're in their early 20s, they're only going to be in their 40s come
Well, here, like this,
1970.
like that little message I read where the guy was stationed with his family there from '54 to '57. He
Yeah,
ended up being stationed there from '65 to '68.
there you
So,
are. Yeah,
I mean,
back again.
yeah, a lot of those, yeah, a lot of the family members, like if your dad was in the Air Force, yeah, I mean, you're going to grow up and you want to be like your dad, so you're going to be in the Air Force. So, what's the chances that you end up back in the same area? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
bunch in this area, so yeah, obviously this one person ended up back there.
And I thought about this and I thought, how could I trace and see? Yeah, I mean, it would be a mission to try and trace all the people that were that were based there that then moved on.
Hmm.
Were there any other similar deaths? I mean, but if you try and Google and look into female strangulation deaths using items of their own, there are thousands across the world. And of course, you don't know that these people went back to America. They could have been stationed anywhere else in the world. So it's very difficult to it would be a mammoth task to look at each individual set of people that were based there at the time, and then see where they went next and see if there's any murders of that similar nature. It would take a team of
Yeah,
you years to do, but I bet you anything, if they did do that, I bet you they would find that somewhere there were similar murders to these, because I think this guy's moved around. He's obviously not been caught here, so I think he's
yeah.
moved around and tried it elsewhere. What's to say he didn't go to
Mm.
Canada next and, and murder women in the same way in Canada, or France or Germany, or, anywhere. It could be anywhere in the
United States.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And that's a
crazy.
scary thought. That really I thought that was quite chilling. The fact that this person could have then got on a plane seemingly doing the normal job that they do and moved to a new area and had a fresh new set of victims again, knowing that they wouldn't be very long before he'd be back out of there again.
So, Tara, actually, I was just thinking about this. So, I mean,
Mm,
I mentioned earlier about it possibly not being a serviceman, but might have been a family member,
mm,
and that got me thinking about Joseph D'Angelo, right, the Golden State Killer, who
okay.
um, was a son of a U.S. Army sergeant, and I know at one point that he was stationed in West Germany, and while there, I mean, he was abused by his father, and he actually witnessed his sister being raped. So it got me thinking about this. It's like, well, maybe it was a son of a serviceman who, you know, had had been abused or felt being abused, and possibly this is a way for him to he's acting out in a way to kind of gain some sort of control over his life, or feel some sort of power, because if you have an overbearing father, you don't really have control over your life, and you kind of feel like you're being held down, and you really don't have a whole lot. So maybe it was a son, and this is just his way to
Yeah.
kind of feel something. I don't know.
Well, that's a really valid. I mean, that's a really valid point because if you say like this kid must maybe was like early, like late teens, maybe early 20s,
Hmm.
could have had an American accent, could have been obviously from America, stationed over here with family. Dad is the serviceman, not the son, and that actually
Yeah,
he's the one that's got the issue and the problem with this. I mean, it would be very interesting to have a look and see who was stationed at the base during this time and which sort of company they were with and then where they went afterwards, and then to see that, say, I don't know, we go with like a company went to Germany, to see whether anything like this happened. We know that there were talks of it online, that there were some girls that had been murdered in very, very similar situation to Jean, that were found at the
yeah,
side of the road in West Germany in the 50s. So could it have been that one of the platoons or one of the companies was sent from here to there, and that these things carried on? And then wherever they went from there, I mean, it would
yeah,
be a huge task to do, but it would be very interesting to get information like that, which obviously we wouldn't be able to get, but it would be interesting to see which companies were
yeah,
based there at that time, where they went. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, if that actually this was a serviceman's child or, family member. That, I mean, especially in the case of Joseph D'Angelo, that makes a lot of sense. So I think that's a
yeah.
really,
I mean,
really valid point.
if we go and we look at like serial killers throughout the 70s,
Mm,
a lot of them in the 70s, 80s, a lot of them were the sons or daughters
yeah,
of U.S.
of
military,
servicemen. Yeah,
and
yeah,
because you
interesting.
have a lot of these, their dads had fought in World War II. They might have been fought in Korea. A lot of these men and women came back with PTSD, which
Yeah,
was not known nearly as well as it is now, and so they had really traumatic childhoods because
yeah,
they have parents who are struggling themselves, and a lot
yeah,
of times they're taking
traumatized.
out their struggles on their children. So
It, yeah,
to me,
it's a brilliant
it's
point.
very possible. I
Very,
think
I
it's very
agree with you. I
possible
think
that
it's a
it
really,
could have
really valid
been a
point.
son or sons. What's scary, though, if
Yeah.
you think about it, though, is going back to the witness who said they heard two voices.
Mm,
The thought that it was two people, two like-minded people that could have been doing this together for whatever reason. So is it two sons of servicemen who are acting out, and they're like, you know what, let's do something. Let's go and
well, it's
I don't know if their plan was to kill, but it's like, let's go out and
no,
let's
yeah.
find some girls. And
It's
then,
funny that
it
you
gets
should.
down to it, and go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny that you should mention that because something I didn't mention while we were talking was that during the autopsy of Jean, the pathologist actually mentioned that he was really surprised that she didn't have more injuries than she had. It was discussed between him and police that she didn't actually have any defense wounds on her body other than
Oh,
the wounds of strangulation. So that then also kind of goes in with the two-person theory, in that what if somebody was holding her hands or holding her and the other person was strangling her? Again, that's quite
oh wow,
worrying that it's
yeah.
two people, but that kind of then adds to the. And then we also know that Brenda heard the two people arguing that night at that time after she heard a woman scream. So it's all
Hmm.
kind of slotting together, isn't it? It's a crazy, crazy case, and of course, to this day, it's still completely unsolved.
Well, we know that it's possible that two people were involved. I mean, it's happened before. We've had cases where
Mm,
there's been two people that have been, um, you know,
complicit.
possibly have been complicit in the murders or whatnot. So, but it's
Mm,
so scary that to think that you have two people that are on the same wavelength, that have the same mindset, that kind of
yeah,
meet, and they're like, okay, well, let's do this together as a team or whatever it might be.
yeah,
I don't know. I kind
that
of
is
feel I
scary.
kind of feel like it might have been an older child of a serviceman or woman
I think
who
that's I think that's
who
very
ultimately did
valid. I
this.
think Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. I think that's, definitely worth looking into.
Yeah.
And well,
Very interesting.
so that,
It-
it was a really interesting case this week. It was one of the ones I think that we could probably go down a rabbit hole for hours and hours and hours on this one, if not
oh,
probably
absolutely.
longer. So so that's this week's case.
Well, thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed this one. And with that, how about we lighten the mood as we always do? We like to do a little thing we call Dumb Criminal.
Hey, dum-dum head, you's a real jackass.
The first one of 2024, so the very first dumb criminal. Let's hear it. Come on, tell me who's stupid today.
Look, Cherry, some people out there, they like to do things like skinny dip, and that's fine, right? You can
Okay.
go, and if you have a pool, you can go skinny dip, and you're not bothering anyone. Or if you have a little pond, maybe you want to just,
Ooh,
let that cold water, tickle your balls a little bit. Whatever it might
fancy.
be,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Okay.
But but there are certain places that you should not skinny dip.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And one of
Anywhere that's
these
got
places,
algae or little creatures.
oh no, you definitely don't want to do that.
No.
The other place you don't want to do it is you don't want to do it at a Bass Pro Shop in Alabama. Okay?
At a what?
So I know you guys don't want at a Bass Pro Shop. So Bass Pro Shops here in the United States are these huge, like,
Fishing.
yeah. So it's like a fishing. Well, it's an outdoor shop, right? So, but yeah, they have fishing, they have hunting stuff, but they're known because these Bass outdoor shops, they have these huge, like, giant aquariums and like waterfalls inside of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So a man decided, after crashing his car outside of a Bass Pro Shop in Alabama, that he was going to strip down into his birthday suit, get completely naked, and
Oh
plunge into
no.
the giant aquarium inside of the store. Okay,
Naked in front of everyone. He's
so
got to have been drunk.
naked. Yeah, so he was a 40-year-old man. He did a cannonball leap into the aquarium and
Oh
then stood
no.
under a waterfall. Now, he would stood under the waterfall until police arrived, when he would then leave the water to yell at two officers. Then he dove back into the aquarium.
Back for a
He
swim.
would
Sorry,
eventually
officers.
just back for a swim. He eventually climbed over the side of the aquarium and fell onto the concrete floor below. That's when police would apprehend him. So he faces now several
God.
charges, including public lewdness, disorderly conduct, and criminal mischief. So they said that the man, he was underneath the waterfall for about 5 minutes before the police arrived. So I hope he had a good time and he enjoyed his little skinny dip inside of the Bass Pro Shop. So
God, what a thing to do! Like, what? Why would you even think about that? I don't know. I'm just going to go in there and just go for a swim naked. What?
you know what? New
Why?
year, new me. That's probably what he was thinking.
Yeah. Start my new year off well. I'm off skinny dipping. What a strange one. What an idiot. Well, if you've got a dumb criminal for us, we would love to hear it. We would love to hear your dumb criminals. You can send them through to us. You can either email us, we don't mind. So it's easy. It's just cherry at crimepediapodcast.com or morgan at crimepediapodcast.com. Or you can send it over on like Instagram or something like that. Just send us over your dumb criminals and we'll be happy to read them out on the show. Brilliant. Well, we will be back next week. Thank you for joining us. Happy New Year to you. And thank you for supporting our little podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode from Morgan next week. So for now, be nice.
And bye.